Hey, welcome, guys, to Behind and Beyond the Fence. Yeah, we got a name for it now. Last episode, we were still not sure what we were going to call it. So, hope you'll tune in. Hope you watched our first episode, which was about what is love. This episode, we're going to name John and Brian, and I'm going to tell you why that is here in just a minute. But I wanted to remind you as you watch these episodes, if you're new to the channel, Off the Chain Ministries, our channel on Pando, make sure you subscribe to it. But also at the end of each of the videos, there'll be like an introduction to who we are and what we represent, a little bit about our ministry, where we operate. So I won't go into all that again, but there's a video at the end of all of our podcasts that will explain how to get in touch with us and a little bit about what we're trying to do. So I want to say thank you too for all the good feedback we've gotten from guys about that I've talked to. So our last episode will have aired by the time you're seeing this, probably about 2 weeks ago, and we've gotten really good feedback on it. Appreciate it. So this one's going to be a little different. This is more about beyond the fence instead of behind the fence, and that's kind of why we named it that. So we're going to be talking periodically to guys who've gotten out, and also issues that are current and practical for lives in prison too. So thanks for all that. Make sure you check out, again, our channel, subscribe to it. That way you'll get a notice every time one of our videos comes up. So the two guys to my left are guys that are going to lead the discussion today. We're going to talk about life before and after prison. This is John Burke to my immediate left, and Brian Daly to my far left. So John and Brian have both served time. So John, kind of tell us about how long you're in prison, that kind of stuff.
All right. Hey, guys. Been to prison twice now in my life. I did 4 years the first time, 6 years the second time, total of 10 years incarceration. I'm 35 now. No, I'm 34. Wow, I'm getting ahead of myself. But I started going to prison when I was 20. 20 was the first time that I went, and between that time, from between then and now, I was only out for maybe 2 years, about really like 20 months. But yeah, I've spent most of the last 12 years of my life in prison.
And you EOS this time from Lottie. I met you when you were at Liberty Correctional, which is out in the Panhandle. What other camps have you been at in Florida?
My first camp was actually Avon Park. And that back then in 2012, that was one of the best camps to be at. So I got blessed. But I've just been to, the reception centers, Avon Park, Liberty, Lottie. That's pretty much it.
Okay.
Haven't really done the tour.
And you've been out for how long?
I've been out for, I think, a year and a half now.
Yeah.
About
so
18 months.
2 years in
November.
Yeah. Yeah. So awesome. And John came to our transition program as also did Brian when he got out. So, all right, Brian, tell us a little bit about your incarceration history.
Hey, guys. Hey, Brothers in Blue. How you doing? Yeah, been to prison a couple times, but I've been locked up since I was 12 years old, if you really want to look back, and it extended into my adult life. And went to prison the first time, little slap on the wrist, a couple years, and then the second time, which was in 2013, for 8.5 years. Got out in 2021. The experience of prison, I knew something had to change, and I was in search for the truth, answers about life, and had time to do it while I was in blue and behind and away from everything else, and had time to focus on making changes to my life. But 8.5 years in prison. I was in Calhoun, Franklin, Orlando Reception, Lottie, go through Lake Butler, all of those institutions. But a majority of the time in the last part of my prison was in Laurie faith-based institution, which I was able to go to as many programs as I really wanted to, which was every day. And
How long you been out, Brian?
I've been out for 4 years, just about 4 years.
Yeah, this summer I think will be
Yeah.
4 years, right? Yeah. So both of these guys were at Lottie when the EOS, but they didn't overlap each other. So you'd already been out by the time John. Or
No,
did y'all?
No,
No, we were in class together.
Oh,
I got
that's
to
right.
Lottie in June of 21, and Brian got out in August of 21. So we had 2 months.
Okay. All right. Which, that overlap, we'll talk about that some as we get into this a little bit. But if you can imagine the idea of two men meeting while they're in prison and seeing that both of them are trying to make changes and then be able to carry that when they get out. And that's part of what our program is all about, is trying to get guys to build relationships while they're in and then when they got out. So when John got out, Brian was already at the transition house, so they'd already known each other, developed some trust. So that I think helped in the transition as we talk about with guys getting out. All right, so that's kind of a brief talk about your prison life. But what I want you guys to do, we'll start with you, John, is talk about kind of what life was like growing up and the kind of the things that led you into prison that a lot of these guys will be able to, I'm sure, identify with, because although the stories are all individual, there's a lot of times a lot of commonality in all of our lives.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay, so I grew up probably like most people who find themselves in prison, dysfunctional home. Oddly enough, had both of my parents, and my parents are actually still together to this day. They've stayed married, but it was both my parents. I got a younger brother, younger sister, but my house I grew up in St. Louis, and it was a whole different environment there than it has been down here. But the home life growing up was very, it was abusive. My father was abusive. My mother was more of like the codependent type. She kept quiet. She didn't really, she didn't do anything that would, get her put in harm's way. So, that was kind of how life was for me. It's just always being on the defense, always, trying to protect myself, protect my brothers, protect my sister. And, that just caused me to really just shut down, And I remember in a program years ago, I learned this, and it's true. It's like at that stage in my life, that kind of inner child that you hear talked about sometimes, that inner child learned early on not to talk, not to trust, not to feel, right? So we don't talk about the issues that are going on in the house. We don't talk about dad's drug use, alcoholism. We don't talk about the abuse. We don't talk about anything that's going on in a major way in the house. So we don't talk. We don't communicate, right?
So on the surface, y'all look like,
right,
and you're getting average family.
Yeah, so that's the thing about my
Right.
family that's different maybe than some others, is that my family looked like of your average American family. We lived in a house, parents, brother and sister, had a dog, both parents working. Nobody would have known that there was all this dysfunction going on inside of the house, because that was another thing is as a family, and even still to this day, we have always put on a front. We were always good at putting on a front and displaying to the world and the people around us that that we were the perfect little family, that there was really nothing going on. So that was another thing that carried with me into adulthood, is I learned how to put on a front. I learned how to make everybody think that I was doing good when I wasn't. And that was something that always prevented me from ever being honest with myself and for asking for help.
Yeah, and even being honest with other people too,
Right.
I guess, because you knew you're some ways living a lie, but
Right.
you got away with it. That's funny. It reminds me of a song that the singer Pink had one time called And in it says, in our family portrait, we look very happy. It's this idea, and she talks about in the song about her abusive life, but their family portrait, they were all smiling and, everything's great, but yet their lives were a mess in reality.
I didn't know you're a Pink fan.
Yeah, hey, I've got a lot of interest y'all don't know about.
The wild side to Daryl here.
Lord.
No, but so lack of communication, no trust because there was so much letdown. You couldn't really trust that. Couldn't trust that I was going to be protected because of the abuse. Couldn't trust that, we were going to even have food on the table sometimes because and it's not even that my family was that poor. It's that my parents made poor financial decisions, So there was a lack of trust, communication, and then the feelings, you weren't so on top of just being a man and, men don't cry. That's the philosophy. That's the mindset that so many people have. But on top of just being a man, it was, we didn't talk about feelings. We weren't allowed to express our feelings. You weren't supposed to cry.
Right.
You weren't supposed to be upset. So
was God in your home at all?
As
far as church or going or Bible or anything?
We went to Catholic church, just for I don't know how long really. I just remember it stopped when I was before we moved to Florida, it stopped. I couldn't tell you if we did that when I was actually a child. I just remember going to Catholic church. I don't know if we even went every Sunday. We didn't go on Wednesdays because I think they have mass on Wednesdays too, right? Catholic churches.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Anyway, so there was and it was just a religious thing, just going through the motions.
Right.
Again, the front that hey, we're going. Here's this good family going to church,
right?
But what I heard about in church wasn't being modeled in the home, and of course, if God was anything like my dad, I didn't want anything to do with him,
Right.
So I had a bad taste for church and, in the beginning and just authority in general, just from my dad. That's why when I got older, into my teenage years, I was all anti-authority, I'm surprised I never got an anarchy tattoo, the A with the circle. I'm surprised I never got one, but, I was anti-government, anti-authority, all that when I got a little bit older, and that all stems from just the dysfunction in the home growing up, and, I was just an angry kid. I was an angry kid because I wasn't being given what I needed as a young man. That's why we learned about an authentic manhood is that, there's these missed moments in life and there's these hurtful moments and there's these missed moments, and the missed moments they still affect me to this day. We never talked about, finances or spirituality or, how to court a woman, how to be in a relationship. And then on top of that, because of the lack of communication and trust, it was always a struggle for me to communicate, which was which played a big role in why it was easy for me to be influenced by drug use,
right?
Because especially alcohol, because the promise is that it's going to help you get out of your shell.
Yeah, it supposedly made you a better communicator, right?
Gives you the liquid courage.
Mm-hmm.
You have the confidence. You know.
So, what age about were you starting with drugs and alcohol?
About 13.
Okay.
Ironically enough, it was the year that I started going to Catholic school.
Okay, private school?
Yeah.
Okay.
Parents decided to put us in Catholic school to try to help us because, we lived in the hood. So they didn't want us going to public school, especially me going into middle school because that was on the other side of town. So they put us into Catholic school, which was, predominantly white school. But here I am experimenting with drugs at the Catholic school. But that's when it happened. I started experimenting with, marijuana and alcohol and that's when I started, stealing cigarettes from my parents, and it just kind of. But it was funny because, so that was around. Went to Catholic school. That happened. Got into a little bit of trouble, not really with the law, just with my parents. Getting like suspended from school, after school detention and stuff.
Yeah, juvenile delinquency kind of stuff. Nothing big as far as crimes go or anything like that.
Right. So, but when we made the move to Florida, which was my 8th grade year, so it had been after we didn't go do another year of private school. We went to public school after that. So, but at that time, it was kind of like I look back on it now, and I kind of had I had already had like a change of heart, like already seen like I'm not making good decisions. I need to do things differently, right? And then of course we moved to Florida, and I just had this different outlook on things. But it was easy once I moved to Florida because as I got older, there was distance. I didn't want to be around. I didn't want to be a part of my family anymore. Because especially once we moved to Florida, because I felt like that was the ultimate break. Like the only family, the rest of my family got left up in Missouri. Those were the people that I really connected with, that I wanted to be around. I didn't want to be a part of my family, So I did everything I could to spend time away from them, and of course running the streets. But it's funny, when you live like that, you always find people who are just like you. So when I moved to Florida and I started making friends, those are the kind of friends that I made. People who had dysfunctional families, and of course we all had a similar past. Like we'd experimented with drugs already. Let's do it again. Now we're in high school. So now there's the peer pressure, and it's kind of the thing to do in high school,
right.
So
it's that thing in a lot of rehab programs where they talk about dysfunction attracts dysfunction.
Right.
So that's why they always say, don't get involved in a female relationship with somebody else who's in recovery with you, because it's just two dysfunctional people being attracted to each other.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and so this is kind of going back. I don't even know how this really started, but even as a kid, I had a problem with stealing. I was a thief as a kid. I can remember 8 years old being caught with a backpack full of my cousin's toys. And, I don't really know where that came from or where I got that, they call it klepto, where I don't know where that came from. But once I got older, it was still just, I always thought of myself as a good thief. So, anytime I went to a convenience store, I wasn't going to pay for it. I couldn't pay for it anyway. I didn't have a job. So, it was just kind of here and there, just kind of, stealing some things. But, when I got to the point where I started doing, harder drugs, that became my way of getting drugs, you
right.
know? So, and it was just, cause most people say, well, I became a thief because I started using drugs. Right. Mm-hmm. And it took me a long time to admit this and even realize it, but I was a thief before that. So I couldn't blame the drugs.
Right.
I can't blame the drugs for me being a thief. I was just a thief, and the drugs just intensified that and made it, I had to steal to get the drugs because I didn't have really a choice. So, of course, that's what ultimately led me to prison twice. But in both cases, it was the same thing, just, doing drugs, getting high, and stealing stuff.
And so the first time you got locked up, it was a theft charge?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's kind of gets you to where you're starting to go to prison, starting to go to jail, and then go to prison. All right. So Brian, kind of start there and go up there, because your life's background is quite a bit different than John's in the sense of family.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, dysfunction. Mother, father, they were both alcoholics, both did drugs, and as far back as I can remember, there was nothing but dysfunction. And so, and I can just start it off at about 12 years old is when going in, getting put in foster homes and getting taken away and going into group homes and many institutions from that point forward. And so inside, you really don't feel like anybody loves you. And I think that was kind of like the straw off the camel's back, is that, I always talk about a made up mind. Well, there was a mind that was made up back then, that you weren't going to put up with nobody's stuff, right? Anybody's crap or anything. And you're on a track of rebellion at that point, is that no authority is going to be able to guide you or anything up until when, and it was up till later on in adulthood. But
I think that's just so interesting, though. Your background is totally different than John's, but yet y'all both came out of it with the same kind of thing. So both you feeling like, I'm not supported, I'm not loved, even though he was in an intact family the whole time you were being bounced around. But y'all both feel this sense of rebellion against authority. And so it's not like there's a formula that if you, as long as you have two parents, everything is going to be fine. Or if you go through the foster care system, this is going to happen. We all come from different areas, but we kind of all develop the same wrong mindset toward things of God and things in life. So yeah, I think that's interesting because y'all are different, but the same in a lot of ways.
Yeah. And one thing to add is that some of the things that you learn along that path is that how people, inside being in multiple foster homes, you see how other people live, and nobody's perfect. No family was perfect, even though they had, a lot of good things. They had careers and everything like that, but nothing was perfect. So I was able to at least formulate some type of conclusion that it wasn't just my family, but at the same time, your perspective is jaded because now you're looking and you're making this generalized statement that everybody in the world screwed up or something like that.
So that's the conclusion you came to, is that everybody's messed up. So I'm just like everybody else. Although some of them look better on the outside, they're all messed up.
Absolutely. And, but I want to talk about the drugs and the alcohol, because that kind of became my coping mechanism. And I talk to so many people that, they get angry, they get sad, they get this, and they use. Well, in turn, what that did for me was I never emotionally grew, and I never know how to handle those different feelings, and so you stunt that growth, which I'm dealing with now later on as an adult, how to deal with relationships, how to deal with people, and so going in it keeps you. It should keep you humble as long as you recognize it, and that's what I've had to do, is just recognize that those are just areas that I'm going to continue need to grow at. But growing up, those things led me to using drugs and alcohol, and that being my coping mechanism and just escaping reality the best I could.
Right.
And it just led more in and out juvie halls, and
mostly for just like drug stuff though, or fighting or
DUIs,
Oh, okay.
Domestic possessions of drugs. Just nothing, no kidnappings, nothing like that. But definitely it was progressive in nature as I went on, and you went to stealing small things to bigger things, and it just progressed, and having thoughts of doing, bigger, better licks,
Right.
and it's progressive. And, but all the while, after seeing some sort of healthiness somewhere through all the trees of the forest, you were able to see a glimpse that there is better. That you could
Right.
see it somewhere through it all, but you could never obtain it because you were stuck in it.
So did you kind of feel like once I become 18 or whatever, my life will get fixed and I'll
I was
get better
18
because I
at
can
12.
Okay. Yeah, I'm saying. So at 12, you felt that sense of, I just need to be on my own. I can figure everything out on my own. Because you weren't getting that guidance.
It seems
in the
like that's
foster
what I
care
had to
system.
do anyways, is to try to figure out life on my own.
Right.
And I think that I think a lot of you guys in prison, after being in classes and talking with many different walks of life, that that there's a lot of similarities in that, and that is that having answers to the questions of life. It's because what you saw was nobody really knew the answer, and trying to figure out that, from death to, relationships and stuff like that, is like nobody had any real grasp on those things. And so you kind of take your own journey, your own trail.
Yeah, there's a way that seems right to a man, and we all figure some way out that's the wrong way, but it's our way. Tell me though, why didn't getting locked up snap you out of that? Like the first time or the second time or the third, whatever. How was it the punishment didn't work? It didn't check you and say, man, I got to do something different.
Well, when you're state raised, I'm telling you, it became normal.
It's a lot. Prison's not that much different.
Yeah, when you're state raised, I mean, I've been in and out of those institutions since 12, so it was it's not too much different. Yeah, some differences, but it's all kind of the same. So yeah, that's why I started off by saying been locked up since I was 12, basically, because you were state raised, you're institutionalized from that point, and so one institution from the other, it's pretty much the same.
Right. Why do you think, John, getting locked up the first time didn't just like, man, I'm screwed up here. Something's wrong. I got to do something different.
Yeah. So I'd probably been to jail 4 or 5 times before I went to prison the first time. So, I started getting locked up when I was 18. So from 18 to 20, I did 60 days, and I know the first couple times I'd been arrested, my parents bonded me out, so it didn't really sit with me. Right. And then when I finally actually had to go do some time, do the 60 days, it was, I thought to myself, okay, I need to stop doing opiates, because that was my drug of choice. So I just need to stop doing opiates and I'll be fine. And I can remember, I think the first day I got out of jail, I had smoked some weed, so it wasn't like, it didn't really do anything to me. And a part of me was like, this is where I'm supposed to be anyway. Because growing up, I just felt like, this is what was meant for me. Like, it was like a rite of passage to go to jail, so, I was in there, I was young and stupid and, watching the music videos on the TV. And I was like, yeah, man, we're in here we are, we made it, it's just,
so it's
crazy
like
to think like
emboldened you that I've arrived now.
Yeah.
Did you get that feeling, Brian? Or did you just like, this is just the way it's been and no big deal?
Nah, no big deal. It's just, it'll be over with soon enough.
Right.
Be back at it.
Did prison though, when you went to prison for the first time? So you started getting locked up when you were 12, but how old were you when you went to prison the first time?
I was 36.
So you made it a long time without going to prison by getting locked up a lot. So on one,
a lot of skill at dodging bullets.
So in one way, it looks like you got your life straight, man. You're doing great.
I just had a lot of experience back at from 12 to be able to maneuver. That's really what happened.
So from 12 to 36, you never go to prison, but at 36 you go to prison. So the first time you went to prison, did you say like, this is a whole nother step now, I've got to really fix my life?
I had been arrested about 40 times prior.
Right.
Before going.
So even prison didn't really.
Not that time. I think really what it came down to was I was ready. My heart was just ready.
The next time.
The last time.
Right.
The last time.
But the first time when you got in and you went out and you went to prison, it had really no effect on you.
Not really.
That was really tangible.
I mean, it took you away from the ripping and running that you were doing, and then you're like, man, that chick or that drug or whatever you were chasing, oh man, and they stick around for a little while and then they die off, and then you're like, oh man, it was too much time because they couldn't hang out long enough for that time. But
were you the first time you went in, were you using in prison, or were you clean while you were locked up?
Yeah, I didn't use in prison neither time.
Okay. So just the environment didn't. Some guys, it seems like, can stay sober in prison because it's
a lot
different.
easier. But I think one of the main reasons is because I knew deep down I could never obtain what I'm going to need,
Right.
There wasn't enough, really.
Right.
When it come down to it, mentally, you kind of block it out. It's like you. I think that's the honest approach that anybody needs to say is that I can't get enough. I ain't even going to start that chase because it's really you can't. I mean, when you're doing 10 pills a day or something like that, and you got to have it like that, there's no way you're going to be able to do that in prison. It's too expensive and it's hard to find and all that type of stuff. So you kind of just like, it's a dead end.
Yeah. So that makes me, I tell guys this a lot of time. The guys that are getting high in prison, they're not going to make it when they get out. It's just obvious they
Absolutely
can't.
not.
But sobriety in prison, although it's good,
It's a good start.
is not an indicator though of whether you're going to be sober when you get out.
No.
In fact, it can deceive you into thinking, well, I'm sober in here. I'm going to be fine when I get out. Was that, did you use when you were in prison the first time?
So my story, my first time is different than Brian's. I did everything. I was terrified. First of all, when I got arrested, they offered me 5 years and I was just terrified the thought of going to prison. And I was in a program in the jail and I'd spent like 10 months there, but man, I made some strides there. I mean, I learned some really good things that I've, changed my life. It was life-changing, and I did everything I could to make changes. And even when I went to prison, which was a terrifying experience, everybody knows what the first time in the reception center is like. It's not, it really shocks you, but and I went through my whole bid doing the right thing. I didn't use. I stayed clean the whole time. I was a part of all the programs, part of all the services. I was the model inmate, but then when I got out, it was, only a few months before I was right back at it, on a different level, but I was right back in the same situation.
So both of you guys stayed sober while you're in prison the first time, and for one level or the other, thought that you were going to be better some way when you got out. Did you?
I think I need to add to that because I did really well under structure. Anytime I went to the programs, I did great.
Even before like any kind of like a rehab program they would send you to or whatever.
It was when I got back around, whether it be family members, old friends, or anything like that, no support. It fell apart. I didn't know how to manage life. That's really what it came down to looking back, is that I had no life managing skills.
Right.
And that's the reason why I felt every time and didn't have any support, anybody that was on that journey around me.
So even your first time, you didn't have a life-changing experience, but you did want to do better the next time on some level, right?
Oh, yeah.
You too, John.
Many times.
And I had thought, you talk about deceiving, right? So I thought, because I was just sober for my first bit, I did 4 years, didn't use the whole time, and I was like, well, man, I don't think I'm a drug addict, I really thought that. But what like Brian was saying, it was the structure. I didn't realize until this last bid, that how important and how powerful structure is in my life, because that's what, when I have structure, solid structure like that, like in a prison setting, I thrive, but as soon as I get into a place where there's no structure, I don't know how to function. I can't manage it.
So do both of you think that most men in prison want to have something better when they get out? I mean, y'all been around a lot of guys, and I know there's an extreme in every area, but do most guys think that, hey, I can fix this and I'm going to get out and I'm going to somehow be better than I was?
They have their idea of what better is, but I think better is a whole new lifestyle. And some people just want to just change bits and pieces, the things that got them there.
Yeah, like not use opiates, like you said, right, John? I'm just going to not use opiates, but I'm not planning on being drug-free when I get out or anything like that.
I think it needs to be understood that the whole lifestyle has to change, every bit of it.
Yeah. Did you same way?
Yeah.
The guys you've been around and stuff.
Well, I mean, most guys, it seems like, they have good intentions. Everybody's got good intentions and they think that it's going to be a certain way when they get out. And, I did the first time. But what I've noticed just a lot of with most guys is that there's just first of all, it's constantly still playing the victim, still victim mentality to some degree. There's still that victim mentality. And then they get out and they carry it with them, that victim mentality, and they always end up right back in the same place, because they don't that's what I see a lot of, a lack of taking ownership, taking responsibility and saying, you know what, I ruined my life. I need to fix it. You know what? I haven't been a good father. I haven't loved my kids. That's what you don't see. But you hear plenty of these pipe dreams. Everybody wants to
be rich.
They want the three. They want the car, the house, the girl. That's what everybody. That's the goal. That's what everybody wants. And that's all that they focus on, when not realizing that if I focused on taking ownership of my life and taking responsibility instead of playing the victim, then I can have those things. But I'm never going to have those things if I'm still playing the victim.
Yeah, you agree with that, Brian?
Yeah. And to add on to that is that I had to come to a place where I realized that I didn't know how to live my life, and I'm going to need help. That's the real big key, is that I still need help today.
So that's really the full level of taking responsibility. So I think most men that I talk to, they think taking responsibility means I admit I did the crime.
Right.
I did it. I was wrong. I didn't get railroaded. I did the crime. I deserve what I got. They think that's taking responsibility. And that is the first step. But that's not fully taking responsibility, because it's not acknowledging all the things that made me want to live that life or do that. Taking responsibility means saying things like, like you said, I didn't like authority. And I don't like to be told what to do. I never felt loved or accepted. I didn't know how to express my emotions. Those are all parts of taking true responsibility for what you do. It's easy to do the first one, but it's a lot harder to be honest and say, I'm a grown man, but I need structure. I still need people in my life to help me. You've been out of prison for almost 4 years, Brian. You ought to be on your own now, right? You don't need any help.
I'm in a circle of good influence.
Yeah. And we're going to talk about that later on, but I think that's important. That's part of taking responsibility, is I have this weakness that I need help with, and I will need help with it on different levels at different times, but I'm going to need that if I'm going to fix my life. And so just admitting the crime that I did doesn't fully address my stubbornness, my pride, my insecurity, whatever you want to call it.
My brokenness.
Yeah, my brokenness. Yeah. John, go ahead. You want to
Yeah,
say
because that's what got you there.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody focuses on the behavior. When it's the mindset, the thinking behind it that led you to the behavior. So if you just fix the behavior, or even admit, everybody at some point will admit what they've done. They don't have a problem doing it. It's becomes easy to do, especially when you're in prison. I have no problem telling people what my charges were, or what I did. But like you said, admitting that it's insecurity, I didn't feel loved. I felt like I was worthless. All those things, I didn't even realize that was the contributing factor and why I was doing the things that I was doing, But even that being said, even realizing that, though, what it is isn't enough.
Right. It's like saying I have a problem with alcohol.
Yeah, it's not enough just to do an inventory and admit your wrongs, right? You have to actually take action. I can't just, it's like, in 12-step programs, the fourth step, it's an important step. But if there's a problem in your life, just going and taking an inventory isn't going to change the problem. Now I know, okay, this is exactly why it happened. That doesn't fix anything. You got to do something about it now. You know? So there's always action involved. That's taking the responsibility, is taking the action.
And I think so too, from what you're saying, but just from working with both of you in prison, is you've got to see when you're in there, you might be at a camp like you were at Liberty for a while. You've been at other camps and said, there's really not much here that's offered, but I'm going to seek out whatever I can get because I need to learn some things. That's the humility. That's part of taking responsibility too, is I don't know how to fix my problem. I got to start seeking something. So taking advantage of whatever that is and saying that prison has to be a learning process for me. I can't just stay on the rec yard the whole time and just get through this with my head down, whatever way I can distract myself watching football or whatever. I've got to use this time to get better, or I'm going to do the same thing when I get out again. And you talk about that a lot, Brian, about using and taking advantage of the things that are there.
Yeah. Well, like you said, there's not much offered everywhere, but there are some things offered. But taking an intro perspective of your character and calling it what it is, and I think that's really what it comes down to, is look in the mirror and be able to call things to what they are.
Right.
And I was a liar, a cheater, womanizer, all that stuff. And when you start to be able to recognize that's what you really are, that's when you can start doing something about it. Is if you don't think you are and you are, that's a problem because you're not seeing things the right way.
Right. I think part of that too, what I see in guys, what's become with me a big indicator as I'm talking to men and trying to decide, are they really in this or not, is defensiveness. I think that's part of that, really not taking responsibility, that I feel like I always have to defend whatever I've done. You know, you stole that. Well, I don't get any money in. There's always that reason why what I've done, or, you know, I'm just a regular guy. I'm not perfect like you are. You know, I've had guys tell me that, you know, I'm not perfect like you. I just do these things. Instead of being able to be corrected by another inmate, you know, much less by a volunteer or somebody who's teaching a class or something like that. I think those are attributes that y'all started to develop as y'all were in, no matter where you were, of saying that's part of what I have to finally come to grips with, is I've got to be able to let people see some things in me and even say, hey, you're this way, and accept that without getting mad every time that happens. And that was an attribute of both of y'all, is because, you know, we'd sit down and do one-on-ones and stuff like that. And sometimes I would be hard on y'all, but you two guys, and guys that I see that are successful, you were always willing to listen. Didn't mean I was right every time. Well, I was probably right most of the time, but you know, but y'all would at least listen. And when I was right, you would say, yeah, I did that. I've got to work on that. I've got to improve on that. Or y'all would come and ask me. You Brian, would do this because Brian was to the point where he'd seen guys that he knew get out and come to our program, or get out and go to somewhere else, and he saw them failing. Dying. I mean, to the guys that we knew, like Gary Lawson, that died of an overdose when he got out, that we'd worked with a lot, that you were friends with. Yeah, and seemed to be doing real well. And so you would often come to me and say, why did he fail? Do you see anything in me that's like that? Because y'all both had the mindset. And I think what we're trying to say is you've got to have the mindset where you're scared to fail to the point that you're willing to get help on any level. Tell me what I need to do because I am deceived and I'm not sure. Help me.
I lied to myself. I've lied to myself all my life. And so we are our worst enemy when it comes down to it. And I need somebody else looking in my life to help me with that.
But that was hard to come to that, wasn't it?
Sure. With trust issues, trust issues is broken early on in with your own family. Can't even trust your own family. Who can you trust, right? And so looking through that lens creates that I'm not going to trust anybody. And so that's the hardest thing. How are you going to accept somebody looking into your life and giving you honest feedback and help you achieve success? And we're not talking monetary success. We're talking about success of being whole at heart and soul. So yeah, it takes a lot of work, and it's a work in progress. It's continual.
Right. John, you.
Yeah, I was just thinking, you know, it was hard, especially in the beginning, because, you know, I first started trying to make changes in my life the first time I went to prison, you know, and it wasn't until this last time that it actually kind of sunk in, you know. So it was, but I remember, because, my story was I was in confinement, and that's when I realized that, I was ruining my life, because I was decided to get high this time in prison for like the first 10 months. And of course, it ended me in confinement, which, I was doing the same thing in prison I was doing on the street. So but I remember, just realizing that I'd been playing the victim, and, I got out of confinement, and I landed a job at Pride, and that's when I met Dale Davenport. Right. And when, and he taught me the gospel.
Right.
And I can remember that was the time when I learned the gospel. That was when I was like, I can't trust myself anymore or anything that's going on in my head, because I can remember times where I was convinced that I knew the truth, or that I knew myself, and it's just, that was so, because I'd realized that I couldn't play the victim anymore. I needed to take responsibility. And then I got hit with, the gospel, and I was just like, man, I don't know anything, and I don't need to try to know anything anymore. It's time to, and just sit at somebody's feet and learn. And that's what I did with Dale. I just basically said to just, teach me everything you know.
Yeah, and I
don't know anything.
Dale's another inmate.
Right.
Right. And he's the one that introduced you to me, but Dale did the initial part.
Right.
So Brian, kind of bring us to about that same point in your life. So you got into Lottie then, and you were looking for something better. And at some point you got introduced to God as what could finally help your life.
Yeah, looking for the truth, those answers about life that I was talking about. Why are we here? What's the purpose of life? And just trying to look past all the corruption in government and the corruption in especially institutions. I mean, it's all around you, from staff on down, probably in prisons and same
in
thing.
Churches even
in
too.
Churches and everywhere, and just seeing that corruption within everybody, kind of something within me that I had seen throughout life, and to talk about that is a moment that I had, that there's got to be more than life than what we're seeing here, because at some point it's meaningless if there is no God, and or we'll just say a creator, and finding truth about that, and that's when I turned to the scriptures, and I just started studying, and it had the answers that I was looking for.
Amen. All right, I think we're going to end this episode, and we're going to end up picking up at that point in our next episode, and kind of find out, how did they find God? John's kind of alluded to it already, but what was their search like, and how did that change the way they lived in prison? I want to really talk about that some. And then we'll also talk about in the next episode what happened after prison, and how did they incorporate those things, and what's kept them both on track since they've been out of prison. So thanks for watching this episode with John and Brian, and we'll see you next time.
Hi, my name is Daryl Townsend with Off the Chain Ministries. If you're watching this and you found our Pano channel, congratulations. Videos on our channel will provide you with Bible-based content. We simply want to preach and teach the Word of God in its purity. We're all members of the Lord's church, the church that He established and that He died for. Many of our videos are provided by the good brothers at World Video Bible School, but some of them, like the one you just watched, are created by us and deal specifically with issues in prison and after release. All of our content is designed for one thing, and that's to glorify God. We don't represent any denomination. We simply are Christians that serve in His kingdom and are part of His church. We're based in Florida and do volunteer prison ministry all over the state, with a greater presence in North and Central Florida. So, would you like to study the Bible with someone? Are you interested in knowing more about God and His good news of salvation? Do you want to know more of how you can faithfully serve Him behind the fence and after you get out of prison? Then write to us at P.O. Box 588, Middleburg, Florida, 32050. We'll do our best to reach out to you. If you're in Florida and would like a spiritual advisor visit, then we can arrange for one of our volunteers to follow up with you. You simply need to put in a request to the chaplain at the facility that you're located. If you haven't yet, please subscribe to our Pando channel so you won't miss any of our content. Remember, you can't be saved by clicking a button.